turned therapist. Our focus in these episodes is to humanize the athlete experience beyond the lines of their arena. In this podcast, we will explore the whole athlete, highlighting the mental, emotional, and social aspects of their journey.
Welcome back to the Athlete Wellness Podcast. Today, we are joined by a new therapist here at Millennium Counseling, Derick, out of Indiana University. And we're super happy and excited to have him join the team and join us on the podcast today. Derick, do you want to give your little intro spiel?
Yeah. I'm always not great at saying a lot about myself, but my name is Derick Boyd. Like I said, I'm from Indiana University. Recently just graduated with my PhD there in counseling psych with an emphasis on sport and performance. I was a former athlete myself, played college basketball. I'm very excited to continue my work with athletes, worked with athletes in the past.
Yeah, cool. We always love the athlete turned therapist narrative. We like that here at Millennium. I think it adds a lot to the conversations, and I think it speaks to how we show up with our clients as athletes. And just coming from a similar experience is definitely helpful. Yeah, so I guess tell us a little bit about what originally got you into this field. Was the path always this straight? I'm sure it was kind of non-linear, but yeah, tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah, definitely non-linear is what a word to use. Definitely wasn't a traditional path. I think for me, a lot of anything that we do in life, I feel like it's very tied to our identity. For me, as the oldest African-American man in my family, in a single-parent household, there just wasn't a lot for us to do. Growing up, sport was almost like my path out to do something. So for me, I think I clung onto sports because it was one of the only areas in my life where I felt like I could be seen and valued and where I felt like I belonged. There was not many spaces outside of sport for me. And so I played sport and I clung onto that most of my life. And then going from high school to college, I didn't have any scholarships or anything. I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. The Gus Macker at that time was very popular. So after I graduated high school, I played in a lot of 3-on-3 basketball tournaments. And I just so happened to have the community coach in Peoria, Illinois, watch my court at that time and offer me a partial scholarship. So for me, I got into the sport, continuing the sport route just from being recruited playing street basketball. That's what led me to college. And then from there, I think the hardest thing for me is at some point, sport is going to end in college.
The tough realization for a lot of people.
Oh, man. Going from a space where I felt like I was almost overly glorified to I don't know what else to do with my life. I realized how lonely it was afterwards. And for me, I was I wonder how many other athletes are having problems transitioning from sport into their life. So that was what really got me start to get interested in the field of psychology, sports psychology.
Yeah, cool. I think that's definitely something that we could talk about forever on
Absolutely.
Probably a whole series of podcasts. I think I talk a lot about with the athletes that I see, trying to remind ourselves that there's identities outside of us being an athlete.
Absolutely.
And I think in the moment, especially when you're playing at elite level, whether that be high school or college or even semi-pro or pro, everything that you do, your day is tied around practice, film, or I'm going to eat this, or pregame that, or I need distraction, I need to go to the trainer. The list goes on and on and on.
Absolutely.
So I think when that all comes to a halt, similarly, for people who graduate from college, who then transfer to and transition to working full-time, who aren't athletes, that's a transition. I think every phase of your life is a transition. I think it's not to say that it's completely different. And we just have that in addition to the athlete portion of it. And I don't know, for me, a lot of it was still working out but just trying to find a balance of it doesn't need to be at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah,
it can be maybe after my work day, or I can fit it in, or it doesn't need to be every day, or it doesn't need to be me PR in the weight room. It can be going for a walk or going for a run. So I think a lot of athletes have a hard time transitioning out of that and kind of finding a new routine. So that's definitely something. Yeah. So I guess for you and in your own words, and I feel like in the media right now, we see a lot of, just after with the Olympics too, it's like, oh, well, if it wasn't, I'm thinking of Simone Biles in gymnastics. It's like, I had a therapy session this morning. Like that was kind of like trending, I guess, on social media. So I guess for you, like what does sports psych, I would define sports psych in your words, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll always go back to what's the study of psychology first? The study of psychology is the study of the mind and its impact on human behavior. You just add sport in front of that and you start to talk about the psychological factors and its impact on like sport and exercise and performance. So athletes are like specific in that way. They're in a sport where they're consistently worried about their performance or trying to perform at a high level. So you want to know, how do we prep their mind to be in the best shape as possible so they do that at the highest level. So I think that's kind of how I see sports psych.
Yeah. And I feel like, again, going back to bringing our experience into the work that we do with our clients is super helpful too. You're able to explain, I don't know, like when you have a session, are you very free talking like, yeah, I played sports or that's like a little bit of my story? Is that something that you typically dive into or sort of assess your client first and just sort of gather information? Are you one quick to share that you were once an athlete too, I guess?
Yeah, honestly, I don't put a lot of emphasis on that piece just because it's like within the title already. Sometimes I really just try to show my humanity and just try to focus on just building a relationship, building rapport. I think, people don't care about how much I know until they know how much I care, to be honest. So I put a lot of emphasis on that piece more than in like who I was. Now, there's some parts where I think self-disclosure is just necessary when you work with athletes. They want to know. They're going
to vet you a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Do you know what you're talking about? There needs to be some some relatability, but I don't know that I put so much emphasis on that in the very beginning.
No, I think, in my work with my clients, well, you can't see this, the people listening, but I'm pretty tall. And they're like, all right, so basketball or volleyball? And I'm like, all right, so we're going to get to this from the start. You know what I mean? I'm like, all right, here we go.
Right.
So then I'm like, that's out in the open. So that kind of helps. I think it's also, again, huge on showing up as a person first in the room.
Absolutely.
I think that's massive. And I think also coming to therapy or a session or whatever for the first time is vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a lot of people, maybe they heard it from their friend and they were like, oh, maybe I'll email this person the next day. Yep. Other people have maybe been thinking about it for months, years, whatever, pushing it off or, oh, I guess I said I would do this, so I'm going to do it. Can be overwhelming and difficult thing to come to. So I think for me, I probably try my, a huge thing that I put emphasis on in meeting someone for the first time is just we're all human. We're all chill. I was probably once in a very similar position as you. So just sort of humanizing all of that.
Absolutely. I have anxiety. I still have anxiety. I've been doing this for a while, and I will share that in the first session. It's still a little bit anxiety provoking for me, even doing this every day. So absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. So I guess in your experience, what are some common issues or things that athletes come in or wanting to work on or goals or just sort of want another space to process or talk about things that aren't on the field, in the arena, whatever, all the things sports that they could be playing. Yeah, I guess what kind of things are people coming in and wanting to talk about and sort of have a source of support on? Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, a lot, but I always try to put into 4 different domains, with the first 2 highest things being something around anxiety or depression. It can be anxiety because I'm having a hard time talking to my coach about wanting to sit out because I'm injured. Just anxiety from that. It can be anxiety from a big game coming up. It can be depression or depression symptoms. I don't want to say depression, but depressive symptoms just from not getting enough playing time. Anxiety and depression seems to be just the higher factors. Then after that, once we get to the higher levels of competition, I think any sort of adjustment and transition is difficult for athletes at times, especially when you're used to being the top person at the previous school, and now you're coming with all the top persons from the previous schools for playing time. I think adjustment, culture shock, depending on what type of environment. If you're used to growing up in the same town with the same people and the same players, and now you're going to a different place, I think adjustment is is something that can be difficult. A new coach, just all adjustment in general. And then I would say the fourth one you see are probably like eating disorders again, or eating symptoms related to eating difficulties as well, especially again going up to some of the highest levels of competition. You see it primarily with women, but you see it with wrestlers and stuff as well, with the different fluctuations that they have with eating. So I think like those four would probably be the ones that I see the most. But what about you?
Yeah, I think definitely similar. Performance anxiety, I think, is a huge one. Relationships with teammates and coaches and just navigating that, and fear of if I say something or if I don't say something, like that kind of stuff. So definitely blends into the overarching theme of anxiety and more like deeper sadness that can be viewed as more of a depressive state. I think for me, something that's just coming up for me was, again, around the identity piece and probably the transition piece too. Like, you also need to remember that, at least I'm thinking high school to college, that is a wild beast in its own. Like, sports aside,
absolutely.
whether it's like, for me, moved like across the country. And
Yeah.
I like,
Oh,
so
wow.
flight to, well, not across country, whatever, but like a flight away, which
Yeah.
it wasn't just like, you also have comparison coming in. Like, my friends were like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like drive down with like a big bag and suitcase and I'm going to college. And I was like, I'm super stressed out, packing like a million bags, trying to realize how I'm gonna get this all on the plane.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. So navigating all of that. But yeah, what is sort of a framework or something that you may share with a client during that transition period? What sort of things do you, within that conversation, do you find yourself either like honing in on, or what sort of questions are you asking? Just sort of how do you humanize that experience, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, honestly, a lot of times, I think people have the answer and they may not realize that they have the answer. Somewhere in your life, you transitioned before. And I think when you're in therapy, the way that I try to like make it really simple, if you're talking about like my framework or my approach, therapy is the process of learning, unlearning, and relearning things. And this may be an area where they just may need to relearn like what it was like when they had transition before, and remind them of those times, because a lot of times they do have those skills. They really do. And sometimes we have to just remind and reflect on like, when was the last time that you felt this way? Or what happened the last time that you had a transition? What was that like for you? And before you know it, they probably have a better intervention than anything that I could have came up with. So I think for me, that's usually my thing. I know therapy is a process of unlearning, relearning, and learning things. And we're probably doing one of those three things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that framework. I may steal that a little bit. I know, I always say it's just kind of like in a therapeutic relationship, when you're talking to someone, you kind of are able to step outside of that like real life reality moment. And you're able to like take an hour, 50 minutes, whatever, and be like, I'm going to really lock in and like prioritize processing what's been happening outside here. And it's super, super, super hard to like push back and actually like give yourself the time to reflect. So I think reflection and allowing yourself, I mean, and for athletes, like it's go, go, go. I mean, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but like
No.
it was like, what more can I be doing, or what should I be doing? Like it was really, really hard to stay still and just like, honestly, like rest. So I think when you're constantly going, it's hard to. So I think, yeah, in working with athletes, I think a lot of the time when I see people throughout their week, it was the one time that they're really able to sit down
Yeah,
and just like
absolutely.
take a deep breath. And they're
Definitely.
like, ooh, okay. Like a lot of the times they're like, I made it here. Like, here we go. And I'm like, and I mean, it's honestly very rewarding to just be that person. Where they just sort of, like,
100%.
take a second to take that deep breath, and like, whether they want to talk about a game or they want to talk about literally nothing, like we're that space.
100%.
It's huge.
And something I want to emphasize as well as I hear you talk, I know we're putting a lot of emphasis on just like people coming in with just different difficulties that they're trying to manage, or just having a space to just vent and talk about things, or just like kind of turn it off. And then I want to also talk about like some of the performance side of sports psych as well. performance is on a spectrum. On one end, you have like clinical mental health, right? That's what we are just essentially hitting on. Some of the depressive symptoms or anxiety or emotion dysregulation, things like that. But as you start to go down the spectrum and you start to, I can cope with the daily stresses of life. I know how to be a productive citizen, a normal baseline healthy person, quote unquote. You start to focus on like, how do I go to that next level? How do I get the best out of me? How do I be motivated and focused and set goals and visualize? And so there are athletes that come in and it's like, I'm good. Things essentially are good. I feel pretty good. And it does match as we start to talk. How do I then get to the next level? And that's where you start to focus on some of those performance factors of how do I focus and get the best version out of myself. And there's that piece as well.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think for me, something that's coming up, I don't think I really defined it as a more like sports psychology performance way of looking at things. But when I was returning from an injury, visualization was huge. Like huge.
Definitely.
I was like, how many times can I close my eyes and imagine myself like running down the court? Because my knee, I had torn my ACL at the time. So I was just like looking at myself and looking down. I'm like, there is no way in hell I'm ever going to be able to run again. But it was like, hold up. Like, lock in, picture yourself on the court. And even within those visualization moments, anxiety would still show up. So then it's like, there we are going to the other end of the spectrum that you were just talking about. And it's like all very, very connected. But yeah, it took me a super long time to just sort of feel more comfortable. And I think when I got back on the floor and I was actually physically like trying to run for the first time, I was definitely less afraid because I had been like playing scenarios over and over in my head. Or even when we were talking earlier about the adjustment piece, looking back at evidence in the past that like you said, I've transitioned before, like I'll be fine. It's all good. I think I had unfortunately had another injury. But after that injury, I was like, I did this recovery process. Like I have done this before, but like sometimes because we're so wrapped in the heat of the moment or we're really, really only focusing and honing in on this end goal of being back, we forget the process. And with forgetting the process, you're also very quick to forget things that you are capable of doing. And I think a therapeutic relationship is really just like, again, allowing yourself the time to process things when everything around you is just going a million miles a minute.
Absolutely. One thing I want to emphasize on what you just said is you had a foundation to go back to because you had done this before. And I think that's one of the benefits of practicing on your mental part of your game. If you practice it so much, if it does happen again, right, you're like, just like our physical practice habits, athletes fall back onto their most practiced habits. You had done this before, you've been injured, and you knew like, hold on, let me stop myself. Let me go back to this thing that I practiced. And it was an easier, smoother transition. And I think that's the important piece of practicing our mental game.
I'm curious, and I have this question because I think I'm sort of seeing it in some of my clients. But from your perspective, what are some things that you can do to continue to build motivation, whether it be the middle of a season or you're in a losing streak or you're not performing up to what you've decided are your standards or whatever. I think sometimes it can be like tough love, like just do it. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even mean to be like so Nike there, but like just sort of like lock in and do it. But other times it's just like, I don't know, for me, I think, and where I find myself going with my clients is like, what's your why? And like know your values. But I'm curious what your outlook on that is.
I'm going to add to what you just said of like finding what your why is. For me, like no matter what we do related to motivation, like relying on motivation alone is just not sustainable because the motivation comes and goes. I think it's trying to integrate as many things in your system that's motivating to you. So if finding your why, if that's something that's motivating to you, of course, let's write that down, or maybe you practice reciting that to yourself, or maybe you have something that reminds you of your why that you carry around with you. Put that into your daily system. Write your goals down. Make sure that you eat properly. Whatever are all the things that help you stay motivated. It'll help us sustain over time if you integrate it into your system. So I absolutely agree with you. Find your why and find all the things that are important to you and remind yourself of why you're doing. Well, that is finding your why of why you're doing that and integrate it into your daily system so you're more likely to sustain it over time.
Yeah, what I'm hearing when you're talking is like the importance of consistency and repetition.
Definitely.
And that is super hard for some people. I know it can be hard for me, but really honing in on that is like in your sport, you're not going to make one tweak to your jump shot and then the next day you're like, oh, it's all fixed.
Absolutely not. Right.
It's definitely like your mind. I know people say this all the time, but like your mind is also a muscle and you kind of have to like continue to practice. So something that I also like to remind people is like, when you're dysregulated and all of that, like, sure, that's a time that you can implement these techniques and tasks or things that we talk about in session. But it's also like focus and prioritize doing those things when everything's going okay.
Okay, absolutely.
Two, like you said, easier to like just slip back into that. It's like, oh, I've been here before, but now I'm feeling a little bit more stressed out. Let's see if it works. But yeah, I guess another question. I think this is also around motivation too, a little bit, but like, again, it can be exhausting.
Absolutely.
And you're
Definitely
like,
could be
oh,
exhausting.
I'm up again and I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, yeah, like staying locked in and day out. And then I guess tips to like avoid burnout too, where I know that's like a huge thing and we can probably talk about that for hours on end. But what's coming up for you right now?
Sure. I think the very first thing that I don't feel like we put enough emphasis on is the rest piece. So that's like athletes, we almost get reinforced. And I said we as if I'm still an athlete. But
I know, we're totally like,
we almost get reinforced to go, 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 and the grind and the hustle and work as hard as you can. And sometimes like we look at rest as almost weak, but I would change the word rest to like recovery. You know, when you're physically going through like an injury, you know, you're icing yourself or you're trying to get 8 hours of sleep or you're trying to fuel your body. You're trying to do all of those recovery pieces. And the mental part is like that as well. I mean, you need to take a time to maybe watch a TV show that you enjoy. I'm not saying watch TV all day, but if it's something that energizes you or makes you turn it off for a little bit, do it. Go out to eat with friends. Those are like mental recovery pieces.
Like refilling your cup type stuff.
Absolutely. So I think I almost look at the recovery pieces as a part of getting the best part of performance as well.
Totally. Something that's coming up for me when you're saying that is an experience that I had with a client. It was super hard for them to not fall to a lot of all or none thinking. So like not fall to the complete other side.
Definitely.
So, okay, I am actually, you know what, I am going to let myself rest today. But then that would be all day. Wouldn't leave my bed. Would binge watch multiple shows. Would Uber Eats or DoorDash or whatever you do if they were even allowing themselves to fuel their body that day. So I also think a lot of it is, again, with like repetition and consistency, you'll be able to find a balance that will work for you. But then again, allowing yourself a little bit of grace that sometimes it's not going to always look. You're not going to operate in that happy medium. Yeah. So I guess a question for that, or just sort of want to hear your opinion on, yeah, how to, like, I think athletes, or maybe I'm now kind of speaking for myself, but that all or none thinking or like go, 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 and then shut everything completely off. It's like kind of hard to balance in that more middle state or middle ground.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what you said earlier about the word nonlinear. None of performance or going anywhere upward is linear. It is very nonlinear. Even when we're talking about our physical health, you know, we're not in just this perfect, you know, shape from the time that we're born until the time that we die. Like it fluctuates and we change and we learn ourselves. And I think even through our physical self, there's a lot of the process of learning, unlearning, and relearning things. You're just learning about yourself consistently. You're not trying to be perfect. We're not machines. Mental health is a lot of the same as if we get into this very black and white, perfection way of thinking instead of like, how can I learn to be the best version of myself, unlearn certain things, learn things, knowing that I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm just trying to give what my best is today. And maybe that's 20%, maybe that's 80%, but I'm just doing the best I can where I'm at today.
Yeah, I love that. I also think in that moment too, something that I'm thinking about is when you are in that, it can be hard. And I think I've said this multiple times now, but like getting to that reflective piece is super hard. Like you're in that moment, like there's a lot of maybe comparison or there's a lot of pressure from within yourself or from teammates, coaches, family, goals that you've sort of like put on a pedestal for yourself. So I think it can be super hard to sort of take that step back and recognize, okay, like I'm doing the best for me right now. I'm still learning about myself. Also, every situation is different. Like,
Definitely.
Every rest or recovery day, I don't know, our Mondays were our days off. Like I'm really throwing back right into it. But like they would not all look the same. And it's okay if they don't all look the same. Again, I think as an athlete, it's very easy to love a routine and love schedule. So when things go a little up in the air, it can be hard to be okay with that.
Of course.
Yeah.
And going right back to that transition piece that we talk about with athletes, that's difficult.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited to have you join us here at Millennium. I think the point of this podcast today, it was just sort of broadly getting us talking and sort of showing to people how connected these two things are, how mental health and performance, it's a spectrum. I think you said it very well. It's kind of one end is going to affect the other and vice versa. So yeah, I think we're super happy to be a source of support for athletes who are either in some sort of mode where they have a goal performance-wise or things are just becoming a little overwhelming more on the mental health side. So we're happy to be here as a source of support, and we're super happy to have you here with us, Derick.
I'm excited.
Awesome. Thanks for listening, everyone.